The house felt emptier at night. By day, there was enough movement. Calls from her husband, messages from friends, the occasional visit from neighbors. But once the sun dipped behind the high compound walls, silence took over. The ticking clock in the hallway, the distant hum of passing cars, and the rustling of trees in the wind became her only companions. She had never minded being alone before. When her husband first left for work abroad, she had embraced the independence. She filled her days with books, long baths, and meticulously prepared meals. But over time, solitude became heavier, settling over her shoulders like an unseen weight. One evening, she stood by the window, watching the shadows stretch across the yard. At the gate, the guard stood at her post, her posture straight, hands clasped behind her back. The woman had been working there for months, always professional, always distant. Yet tonight, something about her presence felt grounding. On impulse, she stepped outside. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. As she neared the gate, the guard turned, startled but composed. "Madam, is everything all right?" Her voice was low, steady. "Yes," she answered, though the words felt untrue. "I just needed some air." The guard nodded, her dark eyes unreadable in the dim light. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't alone. "How long have you worked in security?" she asked, just to keep the moment going. 5 years. "Do you like it?" A pause. Then a small shrug. "It's a job, but I take pride in it." She studied the woman before her. Beneath the crisp uniform, she exuded quiet strength, an assurance that felt oddly comforting. Her face was sharp yet softened by an unspoken gentleness. "You must get bored standing here all night." The guard's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You'd be surprised how much there is to notice when the world quiets down." She let the words settle. Hadn't she spent her own nights doing just that, listening, watching, waiting for something unnamed? A gust of wind brushed against them, and she shivered involuntarily. The guard's gaze flickered over her. "You should go inside. It's getting cold." She hesitated, then nodded. "Good night." As she turned, she felt the guard's eyes linger on her a second longer than necessary. That night, as she lay in bed, the house still felt empty, but the silence wasn't as suffocating as before. The nights that followed felt different. No longer just a stretch of empty hours, they held an expectation, a quiet thrill. She found herself drawn outside more often, lingering near the gate, waiting for moments that felt accidental but weren't. The guard was always there, silent, steady. Their conversations remained simple, but something unspoken wove itself between the words, thickening the air. A glance that lasted too long. A pause before saying goodnight. A shift in distance, so slight yet deliberate. One evening, rain threatened on the horizon. The sky hung low and restless, and the air smelled of earth before a storm. She stood under the patio's light, watching the guard at her post. On impulse, she called out. "Come inside for tea," she said, her voice carefully casual. The guard hesitated, glancing toward the street. "I shouldn't leave my post. It's just for a moment." A moment was all she needed. Inside, the kitchen was warm, the lights casting a soft glow. She poured tea, hands steady despite the quiet tension thickening between them. When she turned, the guard was watching her, an intensity in her gaze that sent a pulse of heat through her. "You don't talk much about yourself," she said, offering the cup. The guard accepted it, fingers brushing hers. "Not much to tell." "I don't believe that." A small smile ghosted across the guard's lips. "Maybe some things are better left unsaid." A current ran through the words, something restrained yet undeniable. She felt it in the air, in the way their hands lingered near the same space, in the way silence didn't feel empty between them. The storm broke outside, rain drumming against the windows. She hadn't noticed how close they had become. Not until their knees nearly touched. Not until the warmth of the guard's presence made her acutely aware of the cool air on her skin. A drop of tea slid down the rim of her cup. Without thinking, she reached forward, fingertips grazing the guard's hand as she wiped it away. The touch was brief, innocent in action but not in meaning. The guard didn't move, didn't pull away. Instead, she met her gaze, steady and knowing. A choice hovered between them, fragile yet charged. For a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. No husband, no consequences, only the weight of what was about to unfold. Then, just as quickly, the guard straightened, setting her cup down with careful precision. "I should go." A statement, not a question. She nodded, but as the guard turned toward the door, she knew something had shifted. The line had been drawn, and neither of them had any intention of stepping back. The first time it happened, it was inevitable. The night was thick with humidity, the air clinging to her skin as she stepped outside, pulse unsteady. The guard stood in her usual place, rigid and alert, but when their eyes met, something broke, an unspoken agreement neither had voiced but both understood. She didn't have to ask this time. The guard followed her inside, silent, watchful. The house felt different in the dark, every shadow elongated, every breath louder than it should have been. In the dim glow of the hallway, she turned, waiting. The guard hesitated only for a second before closing the space between them. Their first kiss was slow, almost hesitant, as if testing the weight of their decision. Then, restraint unraveled. She had forgotten what it felt like to be touched like this, not in passing, not out of obligation, but with hunger, with reverence. Hands mapped unfamiliar territory, heat pooled between them, and when they finally stumbled into her bedroom, it was with the desperation of two people who had spent too long pretending. That night, the loneliness that had wrapped around her for months dissipated. But it was not just one night. Their meetings became routine, each evening stretching into stolen hours beneath the cover of darkness. The guard would slip into the house once the compound was quiet, and they would lose themselves in whispered words, fevered kisses, and the kind of intimacy that blurred reality. Yet, with every touch, every lingering embrace, the weight of secrecy grew heavier. She stopped answering her husband's late-night calls, silencing them with the press of a button. When he sent messages asking if she was okay, she told herself it was better this way, that he would never understand what she had become in his absence. The guard, too, was changing. The professional distance she once held was slipping, replaced by something softer, something more dangerous. One evening, as they lay in tangled sheets, the guard traced a slow circle on her bare shoulder. "This can't last forever," she murmured. She tensed but didn't move. "I know." Lies had an expiration date. Secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, eventually surfaced. And yet, as the guard pressed a lingering kiss to her neck, she made no effort to pull away. She wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The first sign of danger came subtly, an unexpected knock at the door. It was early evening, the sky still streaked with the last remnants of daylight. She had just finished dressing when she heard it. Her heart leaped to her throat. The guard was still in the bedroom, hidden beyond the half-closed door. She forced herself to breathe, smoothing trembling hands over her dress before answering. Her sister-in-law stood on the doorstep, smiling but observant. "I was in the neighborhood," she said lightly. "Thought I'd check on you." A simple visit, innocent even. And yet, as she stepped aside to let her in, panic coiled in her chest. The house smelled of something unmistakable: warm skin, lingering desire. Could she smell it too? Could she see the slight disarray of the living room, the way the air felt thick with something unsaid? They sat, exchanged pleasantries. Tea was poured, hands steady. But beneath it all, tension simmered. Every passing second felt like a risk. Then, a noise, a faint creak from the hallway. She stiffened. Her sister-in-law's gaze flicked toward the sound. "You're not alone?" A test. A warning. "No," she lied smoothly. "Just the wind." A moment stretched, heavy with unspoken suspicion. Then, her guest only nodded, sipping her tea as if nothing had shifted. But something had. After she left, she locked the door behind her, exhaling shakily. From the hallway, the guard stepped into view, jaw tight. This is dangerous. She knew. And yet, When the guard moved toward the door, as if to leave for good, she reached out, grasping her wrist. "Not yet," she whispered. But the world does not wait for those who linger in stolen moments. The next morning, a message from her husband arrived. "I booked a ticket. I'm coming home." Panic spiked through her. The reality of her choices loomed like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and unforgiving. That night, as they lay in silence, the weight of it all pressed down on her. The guard's fingers traced absent patterns on her skin, but her thoughts were miles away. Finally, she spoke. "What do we do?" The guard's hand stilled. "You already know."
She did.
Two paths stretched before her. One led to safety, to the life she had built with her husband, unchanged but forever tainted by the memory of what she had done. The other led into the unknown, a life of uncertainty, of risk, but one where she did not have to pretend. Morning would bring a decision, but for now, they only held each other in the quiet, knowing it was the last time.